Dala Nova Jebe Dra Nobar Jebe Gek Tarba Dan Tam Je Kembe Bardu Chopra Jeba Tam Je Giz Jebe Ma Nang Ka Dang Nyam Pe Sen Chen Tam Je De Wa Tang Den Dung Ya Dang Je Nur Du La Na Me Pa Yang Dabra Sobe Chan Ju Ren Po Je Tobar Jo Dala Nova Jebe Dra Nobar Jebe Gek Tarba Dan Tam je gembe baridu jombra jeba tam je gizu jebe ma nang ka dang nyam pe sen jen tam je dewa dan den dung ya dan je nu de la na me pa yang dang pra so be chan ju ren po je dong pra jo da la na wa je be dra no par je be ge tar pa dan tam je gembe baridu jombra jeba tam je gizu jebe ma nang ka dang nyam pe sen chen tam je dewa dang den dung ya dang de nu du la na me pa yang da para so be chan ju ren po je to para jo de je de sang ma ge gi bar du lung a yesum ge wa la go ma je bar du lung a yesum ge wa la go du de ring ne zon de ne ma san da sam ye bar du lung a yesum ge wa la go san je jo dan so ge jo nam la chan chu bar du da ne gyab su chi da ye jin su ge be so nang ke Rola penchir sanje jo pra shu sanje jo dan so ge jo nam la chang chu bar du da ne kyab su chi da ge jin su ge be so nang ke rola penchir sanje jo pra shu sanje jo dan so ge jo nam la chang chu bar du da ne kyab su chi da ge jin su ge be so nang ke Rola pencher sanje drumpra sho. Manang kadang nyampe senchen tamche dewa dang dewe gyudan dambra gyurji dunya dang dunya ki kyudang drawa gyurji dunya mepe dewa dang me drawa gyurji niring chadang nidang drawe tang nyong la nabra gyurji Manang kadang nampe senchen tamche dewa dang dewe gyundan dambra gyurji dunya dang dunya gi gyudan dewa gyurji dunya mepe dewa dang me dewa gyurji niring chadang nidang dewe tang nyong la nebra gyurji Manang kadang nampe senchen tamche dewa dang Dewe gyundan dembra gyurji, dungyao dang dungyao gi, gyudan drawa gyurji, dungyao mepe dewa dang me drawa gyurji, niring chadang nidang drawe, tangnyang la nebra gyurji. Be mindful of being in the presence of the Buddha, of the Dharma, and the Sangha, the three jewels, the ultimate objects of refuge. Recollect the qualities of Buddha, the qualities of Dharma, and the qualities of Sangha. Remember why they are objects of refuge. Remember why we make the commitment to ourselves become such objects of refuge in the future. Now the 7-branch puja in various languages in the different language rooms. In all the worlds of the 10 directions reside Tathagatas of the 3 times. Before each of you, lions among humans, I prostrate joyfully with body, speech, and mind. By the power of this aspiration to noble deeds, all conquerors appear vividly in my mind. With as many bodies as there are atoms in all lands, I prostrate to all you conquerors. In each atom are Buddhas, numberless as atoms, all in the midst of the heirs of the Buddhas. Thus I conceive of this Dharma Dhatu as completely filled with you conquerors in this way. With infinite oceans of praise and oceans of diverse melodies, I sing the excellent qualities of all you conquerors and praise of all you gone to bliss. With the best flowers and best garlands, best music, ointments, and excellent parasols, finest lamps and superior incense, I offer to you conquerors. With excellent garments and best fragrances, and sandalwood powder heap high as Mount Meru, all wondrous offerings perfectly arranged, I offer to you conquerors. These vast and unequal offerings to each and every one of you conquerors, with the power of conviction and noble deeds, I prostrate and offer to all you conquerors. All the harmful deeds that I have done with my body, speech, and mind, under the power of desire, hatred, and ignorance, I confess each and every one of them. I rejoice in all the meritorious deeds of all conquerors in the tender actions and the heirs of the Buddhas, solitary realizers, still hearers, still in training and beyond, and all wandering beings. You who are lamps of the worlds of the tender actions, who have unobstructedly attained Buddhahood through the stages of Bodhi, all you who are my protectors, please turn the unexhaled wheel of Dharma. With palms together, I earnestly beseech you who may intend to manifest final nirvana. Please remain for as many eons as there are atoms in the world, for the happiness and well-being of all wandering beings. Whatever slight virtue that may have been gathered through prostrating, offering, confessing, rejoicing, requesting and beseeching, I now dedicate to complete Bodhi. This ground sprinkled with scented waters and strewn with flowers, adorned with the supreme mountain, far continents, sun and moon, I hold in mind as the Buddha land and offer it. May all wandering beings experience such a pure land. To the Gurus who possess the three kayas, I offer the outer, inner, secret, and thusness offerings. With thy body, wealth, and all phenomenal existence, please grant the unsurpassed supreme attainment. Whatever slight virtue I may have gathered through prostrating, offering, confessing, rejoicing, requesting, and beseeching, I now dedicate it to complete Bodhi. Om Guru Deva Dakini Rana Mandala Praticha Soha. Please turn the wheel of Dharma of the greater, lesser, and common vehicles in accordance with the dispositions and mental capacities of sentient beings. Namo Guru Dorje Changwan Tele Naro Dhamma Mi Dabo Padu Jiden Gun Garden Sunden Sawe Lama Sham Sanju Lama Yindam Chokyam Waso Wada So Dangje Je Lo Hong Kem Ben Ginto Me Samden Gen Dabe Dong Song Yang La Gen Song Me Gen Wado Je Chang Pa Jiden Gun Pe Shabla De De Tatu Sam Gen Kyo Le Me Jinji Lo Shi Tu Je Jinen Gen Mo Pa San Ne Gen Sen Do De De Dobro Jin Je Lo Hong Jin Je Jin Chang Sa Bemageza Dombola Yasan Jogging on the Bamanjane, Guru Guru so Guru Bemas de Ome Juge Important to such a good one as in Jokum to so we love me Shamla so So good morning and good evening to everyone. I also want to make a note of thanks to those of you who are able to keep your video on. Here's a secret that people who do public speaking or things like this, maybe a secret that we don't let the other people know is that our ability to do what we do is based on being able to see our audience. The feedback tells us, where to go. So those of us who are not Buddhists, or nowhere close to being Buddhists, don't have Jedi mind tricks, don't have ability to just put things out there and it will work. So the ability to see at least some faces, it helps in having this interdependence, this flow. So I know some of you have reasons why video is not on. You might feel that there are too many chaotic things happening in the background, but that's also the reality of life. You don't have to apologize for the reality of life that is happening all in the background. Of course, if you feel like every few minutes you have to get up and run around and chase a toddler or chase a bear that has come into your house, and then yes, that maybe is a little distracting for everyone. For me, then it will be I get too interested, right, in what you're chasing in the background. But otherwise, thank you to those who are able to turn your video on. Looks like Joyce has a hand raised.
Yes. I would just like to say that I was also thinking how much I appreciate being able to see everybody's faces, and just how these faces have become a part of my life over the past year.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for sharing. Of course, there are really, no pressures to anyone. Don't feel like you have been pressured to turn your video on. So the opening prayers, the relative bodhicitta expressed in the aspiration and application recitations right at the beginning, right? So I want to call your attention to the wording in the aspiration bodhicitta. The words that we chant are words that were given by the founder of Drikung Kagyu, Kyopa Jigten Sungön. Of course, all traditions of that are grounded in the Mahayana and the great vehicle approach, and the approach of bodhisattvas, have the same meaning for bodhicitta. But the particular wording that we are using comes from Kyopa Jigten Sungön. So there it says, all mother sentient beings, limitless as the sky. So all mother sentient beings, without limit, without exception. Yeah, so that's the first. Then he narrows it, or brings into focus, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and all-knowingness. So in the second part, he brings into focus, in other words, he brings into focus those that are especially difficult for us to really think kindly about, for us to really be concerned about. And who are these? These are people who we have labeled as the ones who cause us problems. As the phrase, the enemies who hate me, I think most of us don't really have someone or a group of faces pop up when we say that. But basically what that is saying is those who bring us harm, those who act against our welfare, those who cause us harm. Enemies who hate me are those who are very intentional, obstructors who harm me, those who are less intentionally causing us harm, standing in the way of us getting what we want, but nonetheless, which we have considered to be against us. So those are the, general troublemakers. Remember, right? This label troublemakers is a label that we stick onto others. The third group, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and all-knowingness, or liberation and omniscience, this third group is a more specific group, and this group pertains to those who stand in our way to liberation, one aspect of Buddhahood, and all-knowingness, the other aspect of Buddhahood. The state of Buddha is characterized by these two qualities. On the personal level, we are liberated. We are free from confusion. We are free from the mental defilements. The other aspect in the state of Buddhahood is, at the state of Buddhahood, one becomes all-knowing. And so in that way, it is said that even the 10th Bhumi Bodhisattvas, even the Pratyeka Buddhas, even the Shravakas, they do not have this second quality of all-knowingness. So this third group of troublemakers are troublemakers that stand in our way in our spiritual goals. You could say that the first two groups are standing in the way of our regular mundane goals. But the third group are those who stand in the way of us reaching our spiritual goals. So all of them, regardless, we are now making the aspiration to achieve the state of Buddha for their benefit. Next part, may they have happiness and be separated from suffering. These two is the definition of loving kindness or metta and karuna, compassion. So towards them, we have this feeling of goodwill, metta, and karuna, compassion. May they have happiness. May they be happy. And may they be free from suffering. Final, I will swiftly establish them, meaning bring them. That's a little awkward, that literal translation. Establish has a sense of putting up. So may I quickly, swiftly bring them up to the state of the most perfect and precious Bodhi awakening.
Sorry, Dr. Lai, I missed that part. So about final, I will swiftly bring them, and then I lost it.
Yeah, okay. So it says, I will swiftly establish them or quickly establish them in the state of the most perfect and precious Bodhi, right? So establish, I said, it's a little awkward. It's a literal translation of the Tibetan, but what that means is it has a connotation of bringing them up to a higher level. And what is this higher level? This higher level of state of Bodhi, Buddhahood. So may I quickly lead them to this state of Buddha. Now, this should not only be, obviously, but we still have to keep reminding ourselves, this should not just be something that we memorize and then we open our mouths, whenever we sit down to do Dharma things. And so I shared with the chanting group, we have every Monday, same time as now, every Monday, the chanting group. I said, how we practice this and how we need to practice this is, so that point out, right? May they have happiness, or may they be happy, may they be free from suffering, right? Now, we think, oh, the way to practice this is to walk around thinking, oh, may they have happiness, may they be free from suffering. Yes, of course, that is very good. If you're able to maintain this as you walk around, as you drive around, as you run around, as you, I don't know, swim around, you're thinking like this about sentient beings, about others. But a very practical application of that is, for example, whenever we find ourselves in a place of conflict with somebody else, whether it's minor, meaningless conflict, someone being rude to you when you went out to buy something, someone being rude to you, or you perceive that they're rude to you while you're driving, or, long-standing disagreement and fighting. Remember this. Remember their suffering. Remember their happiness. See, whenever we label others as troublemaker, as a problem, we have like basically ignored this fundamental fact that they want happiness too. They don't want to suffer too. That they are motivated by those two things. And so whenever we find ourselves, in a conflict with others, just lightly, just the ability to remind yourself, what about their suffering? What about their happiness? That instantly, brings some space into the situation. And bring some breathing room, as we say, into the situation. So once we bring some breathing room into the situation, introduce some space into the difficulty, then we can see, like, yeah, despite I want happiness, I don't want suffering. The other person wants happiness, don't want suffering. Despite the similarity here, we still get into these conflicts. It's not to say like, that the conflict will disappear when you just do this. The conflict may or may not disappear so quickly. I mean, eventually it will disappear. Everything is impermanent. But, when you introduce that into the situation, then you can, say, look, despite, everyone wanting the same thing, we bump into each other, we knock around each other. So now, better we all become Buddhists. Then we won't bump into each other and cause harm to each other. I will swiftly establish them in the state of the most perfect and precious Bodhi. So with this, with this kind of training, serving as the foundation of our interactions, then we can go do whatever is necessary for resolving these conflicts. Some of these conflicts you need to go to mediation. Some of these conflicts you need to go take anger management classes, And so this is a good mantra to have, simple, what about their suffering? What about their happiness? And this is the 8-word mantra. What about their happiness? What about their suffering? This is how we cultivate metta. This is how we cultivate karuna. More impactful than going on a weekend retreat, in some nice resort, meditating on metta. It's easier, to meditate on metta and feel, the warmth of metta and karuna, when you wake up to yoga, and then, this healthy breakfast is prepared, then when you finish eating, you just walk away, miraculously, all the dishes and the plates will be washed, then, someone maybe like me, speaking for the next hour, and birds are chirping, and you all feel good, metta, oh metta. Once in a while is nice, to have a treat like this. But the real practice, right? The real cultivating of metta and karuna, it's when we go about our lives, remembering to pause and say, what about their happiness? What about their suffering? Now, verse 71 to 78, chapter 8, Shantideva continues in his tactic to really exaggerate certain points, to counterbalance the exaggerations that we habitually do, but we pretend that we're not exaggerating, which is how nice, how wonderful, how worthy, samsaric pleasures are. We exaggerate that. And then on top of that, businesses have a financial reason to also exaggerate that. Governments, elective governments, in order to remain elected, they also want to tell you how wonderful all those things are. So everything around us is exaggerating how great, how wonderful samsara is. All Shantideva is doing is trying to balance that a little bit. And then when he tries to balance that a little bit, in fact, some of us might go, oh, I don't like this, this is... Again, what has he said that is not true? Nothing. 71 and 72 is just wonderful. So 71, he says, what's more, possession of another's filth is not to be acquired free of charge. Possession of another's filth is not to be acquired free of charge. All is at a price, exhaustion in this life, and in the next, suffering of hell. 71. Yeah, in the section above, if you remember, he's basically talking about what is this bags of filth. He's talking about, this body, it's a skin bag, that contains just filth. Then through those holes, filth is always coming out. And he says, why do we, chase after this so much? He says, so now he says, what's more, not only are those bags of filth, but possessing those bags of filth, it's not free. What do you have to pay? He says, right now, you pay it with exhaustion. Because it takes so much effort to go acquire other people's filth. Then in the next life, he says, the suffering of hell, because you will do all kinds of things, to defeat all those that stand in your way, those enemies that stand in your way of acquiring this bag of filth. I say, that's the suffering of hell, Here, this life, next life, is not limited to literally just like this life and then next life. Here, this life, next life can also mean, when you get what you want. And next life means when that is over. When you possessed another's filth, when you finally get it, that's this life. But when you finally get it, exhaustion. And then when you lose it, it's hell. Yeah. It's true, So you pursue, and finally the other person says, I do. And you're like, oh. With I do, comes a different set of exhaustion. When you're chasing, that's one set of exhaustion. And then finally, when they say I do, then the beginning of another set of exertions. You get exhausted. Then finally, when, if they disappear from your life, suffering. Shantideva says, this all comes at a price. Have you looked at the price tag? Again, I have to remind all of us, right? Shantideva is not telling you, to ditch, the people around you. He's just showing us the whole picture. Second part of this chapter, he will then talk about how to embrace those we care about and even those we don't care about. How to really embrace and love and care for them. Skillful way. So 72, he says, to gather riches, young boys are unable. And what can they enjoy when they are full grown? The whole of life is spent in gaining wealth, but when they are old, too old to satisfy their lust, Everybody knows, the only people who look good, coming out of a sports car, if you're a 20-something, but no 20-something really comes out of a sports car. 9 out of 10 times somebody who comes out as a sports car is like trying to crawl out of the sports car because those seats are not created for people more than 20-something. But yet, there's a whole industry to sell these sports cars to people who will sprain, a muscle trying to get out or get into the car. And even those, who like parents, parents who can afford it, get it for their kids. Now that's a recipe for disaster there. 73. Some are wretched in their great desire, but worn out by their day-long work. They go home broken by fatigue to sleep the slumbers of a corpse. So I said before, right? Yeah? One simple biography of most people is basically you got tired of sleeping, then you woke up, right? Then when you finally get tired of being awake, you go to sleep. And then sleep, you got tired of sleeping, you woke up again. 50 years later, 80 years later, they bury you, they burn you. That's it.
Sorry, Dr. Lai. 80 years later, then?
80 years later, then they bury you or they burn you. 74, Shantideva talks about, those who have to travel for their work. Some wearied by their travels far from home must suffer separation from their wives and children whom they love and long to see. They do not meet with them for years on end. Verse 75, some ambitious for prosperity, not knowing how to get it, sell themselves. Happiness eludes their grasp, and pointlessly they live and labor for their masters, which is many of us, right? We are ambitious for prosperity, we end up selling ourselves. 76, to the degree of we become enslaved to this pursuit of career, to this pursuit of wealth, to this pursuit of fame. So he says, some sell themselves no longer free in bondage, slavery to others, and destitute, their wives give birth with only trees for shelter in the wild. So this also doesn't need to be taken literally. Of course, literally, many people experience this, and some out of no choice. It's actually poverty. Here, Shantideva is not so much talking about poverty even. He's talking about insatiable greed to succeed, to be successful. Or even sometimes couched in terms of to provide for my family. But the degree that we all, we have to to the degree that we feel like we have to do this until supposedly you're doing it for them, you never see them anymore. Supposedly you're doing it for them, but it is as if they're living under trees. Regardless, they could be living in a mansion, but emotionally, it's like they are living under trees, homeless. And 77 and 78 is talking about, again, in the name of making a livelihood, sorry, in the name of making a livelihood, making a living, even go to the point of endangering their own lives, going to war, exposing yourself to dangers of life and death. Some are even put to death by fire. In verse 78, it says, "79, the pain of gaining, keeping, and of losing all." It says, how much work, how much pain, how much trouble is all involved in first gaining, then keeping, and then eventually losing it all. So, we spend, first third of our lives learning how to gain and gaining. gain. Next third, maintaining, keeping. Last third, losing. He says, how much of that we have become enslaved to and never really asked, like, wait, what is this? What is this all about? What is this all about? Getting stuff, keeping stuff, and how to get rid of stuff. So verse 79, see the endless hardships brought upon us by property, by owning. For those distracted by their love of wealth, there's no chance for freedom from the sorrows of existence. So now this word distracted, yeah. So again, it reminds us, what is Shantideva doing here, right? He's teaching us how to still the distractions, because this chapter is about samadhi. So the things that get in the way of achieving samadhi are all these distractions. So for those distracted by what? Here he's talking about, elsewhere he's talking about bodies. Now he's talking about wealth. He says, by the love of wealth. So as in the Bible, St. Paul says, the love of money is the root of all evil. Money itself need not be evil, Other people need not be evil. It's the love of money, it's our attachment to. And those who don't have money, suffer from a constant hope of spending money. Those who have money, suffer from constant fear of losing money. Verse 80, they indeed possess of many wants, will suffer many troubles, all for very little. They are like the ox that pulls the cart and catches bits of grass along the way. Oh, this imagery, So it says, we're like an ox pulling a cart, That's the burden that we carry. And what do we get in return? Little bits of grass, as you're pulling the cart along and along and along. You bite a little bit here, a little bit there, and that's it, "81, for the sake of such a paltry thing, such a small thing, such a meaningless thing, which is not even rare, which even beasts can find, tormented by their karma, they destroy this precious human life so hard to find."
We squander away this precious human life because we have invested this precious human life into gaining these little blades of grass that we get to munch as we pull along this heavy cart. So let's take a short break now.
Om Wage Jware Mum Wage Jware Mum 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 Om Wage Jware Mum Wage Jware 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 Om Wage Jware Mum Om Wage Jware Mum Wage Jware Mum. 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 Om Wage Jware Mum Wage Jware Mum.
So 82 and 83. Let's read that now. All that we desire is sure to perish, on which account we fall to hellish pain. For what amounts to very little, we must suffer constant and exhausting weariness. With but a millionth part of such vexation, enlightenment itself could be attained. Those who crave a plague far more than those engaged upon the path, yet Buddhahood is not what they attain. So these two verses is saying, first, like what price have we been paying again and again and again to get so little? And whatever we think we get, that we think is worth it, in fact, we have never really thought about, is it really worth it or not? And in 83, it says, if we would only use 1/millionth part, 1/millionth of a part of the energy that we have exhausted in pursuing happiness of samsara, if we have only used 1/millionth of that energy towards pursuing freedom from samsara, towards pursuing the state of Buddha, we would have achieved Buddhahood by now. And so 84. Reflect upon the pains of hell and other evil states. Weapons, fires, poisons, yawning chasms, hostile foes. None is on a level with our cravings. And so here he says, like compared to the cravings that drive us to these places are even not so terrifying. It's our craving that is so terrifying. Specifically here, weapons, fires, poisons, yawning chasms, and hostile foes. He's talking about even if we have to deal with these types of threats in the context of pursuing the Dharma, practicing the Dharma, he says they are minor compared to the ways in which our cravings for meaning and satisfaction in samsara brings us, craving for that, looking for that in all the wrong places that only result in hellish suffering. He says, the weapons that you might face, the fires that you might face, the poisons, so to say, that you might face in the pursuit of Dharma is nothing. But then for most of us, it's like, oh no, getting on Zoom is too early, going to the center, too much traffic, We have so many reasons, not to really work on the Dharma that we give ourselves. Now he begins to transition into the main training for achieving the kind of samadhi that we want to achieve if we are on the Bodhisattva path. So the last few verses on this section where he points out to us the disadvantages of distractions. Now he goes back from 85 to 88 to praising the excellence of solitude. without a stable, undistracted mind, it's going to be very hard to practice the Bodhicitta meditations that he will talk about in the rest of this chapter. The stable, unmoving mind, you know, the ability to not move. Not cannot move, but not move. The ability to not move is what shamatha is. Abiding, stable and peaceful. Shine, ne is to abide, to remain. At Tibetan, she is where it's peaceful. Peaceful means the distractions are pacified. And in order to achieve this kind of mind, this shine, it's not just, you know, like, oh, I need to meditate, I need to meditate. It's being committed to the resolve of leaving behind the 8 worldly concerns. Right? Remember that? I shared with you, you know, one short passage from Gyoba Jigten Sungen, that the 8 worldly concerns, you have to be determined again and again. You have to recommit to this determination not to pay attention to the 8 worldly concerns, or to keep minimizing 8 worldly concerns. When you minimize the 8 worldly concerns, then the mind doesn't need a lot of formal training. It can start abiding in a state of shiva, in a state of being at peace, calm, clear, and not so easily distracted. So 85 to 88. So revolted by our lust and wanting, let us now rejoice in solitude. In places empty of all conflict and defilement, the peace and stillness of the forest. Happy those intent on others' good, who roam in pleasant places, formed of massive stone, refreshed by moonlight sandal-scented beams, by gentle woodland breezes soothed, in caves beneath the trees, in houses left abandoned, may we linger long as we might wish, relinquishing the pain of guarding our possessions. Let us live in freedom, unconfined by cares. to have such liberty unmarred by craving, loose from every bond and tie, a life of such contentment and such pleasure, even Indra would be pressed to find. So this is such a beautiful contrast, to our habitual ways of thinking about, what is happiness, what is security, what is worth it, what is not worth it. Of course, you and I, probably, cannot quite literally, right? Just do this, walk off. Maybe also not willing yet. But it doesn't have to be either 0 or 100, To whatever degree we can embody what is described in 85 to 88, to that degree, right? We are able to experience more and more of the freedom that is described from 85 to 88. Now, this kind of freedom and without care, can come from some unskillful states of mind. Selfishness, for example. Laziness, another example. This is not the motivation here. The motivation here is on verse 86. Happy those intent on others' good. That the motivation has to come from why we are choosing to live more and more this kind of freedom from care, freedom from being tied down. It's because our contentment is now being built upon the motivation of intent on others' good, others' happiness, others' freedom from suffering. So simply wandering around, in nature, living a life without a care, that is not yet Shantideva's ideal described in 85 to 88. A crucial point of 85 to 88 is happy those whose intent on others' good, those who think of others' good, motivated by others' good, and therefore become happy. That is a crucial element. So if we have that motivation, and then we're able to let go of so many entanglements and live like this, he says, then even Indra, the king of the gods, will be jealous of you. 89 says, reflecting on such ways as these, upon the excellence of solitude, pacify completely all discursiveness, and cultivate the mind of bodhicitta. So reflect, consider again and again all the disadvantages of the distractions that we get caught up in, on the entanglements that we get tied up in. Again and again, we reflect on this. And in reflecting on all the faults, so to say, all the disadvantages of distractions, and in seeing that, we begin to appreciate more and more the excellence of solitude. Then we can work on simultaneously pacifying busy mind, busy mind, busy mind, busy desires, and instead of that, exchange it with cultivating bodhicitta. Then verse 90 on, it's cultivating bodhicitta. 90 to 107. 187, sorry. So another, about 90 verses is all about that. So Shantideva will talk of this practice, this meditation, this samadhi, in terms of cultivating, equalizing self and other as the preliminary step, then exchanging self and other. So we should stop here for today. So let's see, we have a few minutes to see if there's any questions or comments. Yes, go ahead.
Dr. Lee,
Mm-hmm.
I am just curious as to how one can be intent on others' good when you're in solitude, completely isolated from other people.
That's not the solitude we're talking about, correct?
Okay. Well, it sounds like it in Shantideva's description, but
that's not the solitude we've been talking about, you know.
the metaphorical solitude.
Yeah, I've emphasized again and again and again that it's not that kind of solitude.
Or is it temporary solitude?
Doesn't matter, you know.
Yeah.
It's not that kind of solitude necessarily. Some in some situation, yes, it is that kind of solitude. Milarepa didn't care to see anyone. Intent on the good of others is not busy with others. Yeah, it's a very different way of thinking, of understanding how to really benefit others. We think benefiting others is being busy with others. So that's the first point. Yeah, so maybe that's the first point. We have a tendency of thinking benefiting others mean being busy with others. But being busy with others, often, are we really helping anyone? The Chinese have a saying, you know, it's like the clay Bodhisattva crossing the river. What does that mean? You know, of course, you know, the idea is that a Bodhisattva ferry others across the river of suffering. But if all you are is a clay Bodhisattva, meaning a statue, then, you know, you cannot even protect yourself when crossing that river, you know. You will be completely dissolved into this river of confusion. So first, without power, without ability, benefiting others in the way that we normally think of benefiting others is pointless. First point. Second point, the solitude that he has been talking about is the solitude away from the 8 worldly concerns. The busyness that we have been with is not helping beings, it's serving the 8 worldly concerns. How literal or not literal that solitude is, it depends on individuals, it depends on circumstances, it depends on conditions. But if the self is mired in entanglements of the eight worldly concerns, even if it has the semblance of you being a bodhisattva, the semblance of, oh, teaching Bodhicharyavatara to people twice a week, all of that, you know, that's all nonsense. In emphasizing like the necessity of so-called teachers, you know, to walk the talk. Kyopa Jigden says, he says, you know, those teachers who don't have qualities, you know, meaning they don't walk the talk. He says the teachers who don't have qualities, you know, they are like these tata molds, you know, with no design. So whatever clay, you know, even superior clay that you put into the mold, you know, it will never produce the Buddha images that you want to produce. So it's important that we don't get caught up in just appearances. The appearance of benefiting others may not be benefiting others. And the appearance of being in solitude may not be solitude, conversely. It's possible to be, you know, solitude in the forest for 20 years. Then turns out you're a Unabomber. Unabomber is referring to the guy who bombed many years ago in the US. There was a hermit. Famously, there are these retreatants, you know, who will like throw stones, you know, at people when people come to say, please be my teacher, please be my teacher. Yeah, throw stones at them. And so they say, you know, this is truly benefiting beings. Appearances are deceptive. And meanwhile, we are sending emails out, we are posting, on Facebook, reminding people, this teaching is happening, this is happening, this is happening. We even pay Facebook to promote this is happening, that is happening. 50 people are here, 500 people are here. Is that really benefiting beings? Hard to say. But don't start throwing, stones at people in the Plaza de Armas in Cusco and think you're benefiting people. Probably not, actually. Judy.
So is essentially this chapter is about state of mind. Solitude is a state of mind. Chasing after wealth is a state of mind. And we cannot look at appearances and determine what the state of mind is. Is that sort of the part of the point of this?
One of the points. I think all I'm saying here is the appearances part, he doesn't say so explicitly. Yeah. But yes, it is about the mind. And there is some correlation between appearances and reality. Of course, there is some correlation. So generally speaking, like Milarepa says, he says like, yes, in theory, you can practice and be a great practitioner living in the city. But chances are not likely. So there was a certain point in his life, Milarepa says, now it makes no difference whether I live in the mountains, rarely seen by people, rarely in contact with people, or if I live down in the village in the midst of everyone. He says, now he says, I know I've reached a state where it makes no difference to me anymore. But he says, for the sake of future generations, I'm going to stay in the mountains. That's how he benefited beings. Yeah.
So you can be sitting at home, a hermit, like you said, and be a Unabomber, or be watching TV all day.
Mm-hmm.
Solitude is not necessarily what it seems to be.
Yes.
State of mind.
Yes.
Sorry, Dr. Lai, just now you talk about Milarepa.
Mm-hmm.
In theory, can practice in the
Milarepa says, in theory, yes, you can practice in the city, you can practice in the mountains, but in reality, it's very hard if you are still in the city. Again, you know, like our tendency is to be busy. So Milarepa says, I have to set the example of staying in the mountains. It's too easy, you know, to just say, oh, you don't need to renounce the things. You just need to renounce your attachment to things. It's easy to kind of kid yourself, you know. So there also need to watch out. So the supreme example, you know, Buddha Shakyamuni said that he was a prince that was destined to take over from his father. But he walked out. That could have mean something. In fact, it is said that one of the things that Mara, the tempter, did on the eve of Siddhartha's awakening, in fact, he came to Siddhartha and said to him, you know, very good reasoning. Hey, come on, you're a prince. You're the crown prince. You could be a great emperor. What are you doing sitting here on the tree, under the tree? Aren't you selfish? Aren't you going to benefit more people if you go back and be a great king and set up good policies and blah, 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 and all of that? Why don't you go home? You know, you are just wasting your time here. You're being selfish, sitting alone in the forest. You should go home and become a great king and benefit beings. Mara tried that, presented that to the future Buddha. And the Buddha says, I see what you're doing, you know, these are all part of your tricks. And I reject that. So Buddha Shakyamuni, you know, he did not say, oh, now I'm enlightened, now I'm Buddha. Okay, I'll go back to my kingdom and become king, become wise king. Mostly he stayed on the outskirts of busyness. Mostly he spent his time, in a state of meditation. Did he need to meditate? No. But to be in a state of meditation has become the natural state for him. So a lot we can learn, I think, from what we know about the historical Buddha. So again, like in Kyopa Jigten Sungen, in his teachings, he emphasizes a lot, actually, the importance for us to look back to the example of the historical Buddha. In contrast to, overly talking about, kind of these more outrageous, Vajrayana types of exaggerations, the enlightened king, the crazy yogi, the crazy wisdom master. Yeah, so thank you, for the benefit of beings. You all should ask questions, to plant some questions, to instigate some, reminders for all of us. This is really helpful. So again, we have reached the time for this this morning, this evening. So we will continue on Saturday. Quick update on like the new space for Urban Dharma. Painting is starting this week. Some volunteers are going to be there. And our target kind of use of the space is the New Year's Eve service. Not really that much time between now and then, because there's all kinds of holidays, and again, people get busy. But hopefully we can make it work. Changchu Semcho Rinpoche Ma Ge Ba Nam Ge Gyurji Ge Ba Nyam Ba Me Ba Yang Go Ne Gong Du
Bell war show.
Gracias.
Gracias.
Dr. Lai.
Gracias, Dr.
Gracias,
Lee.
Dr. Lai.
Gracias, doctor.
Gracias.
Thank you, Dr. Lee.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Bye bye.